The massive chamber stretched out like a cathedral of glass and metal. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy sat in curved rows that spiraled upward toward a glowing dome. The air hummed with translation devices working overtime, turning alien languages into something everyone could understand. At the center of it all, a small group of humans sat quietly at their assigned table. Kehoe adjusted his simple black suit and looked around the room. As the human ambassador, he had spent 3 years preparing for this moment. 3 years of learning alien customs, studying galactic law, and trying to understand why so many species seemed to fear humanity. Now he sat in the heart of the Galactic Council, hoping to finally bring his people into the larger community of spacefaring civilizations. The humans had discovered faster-than-light travel only 50 years ago. Since then, they had built colonies on dozens of worlds and made contact with hundreds of alien species. Most of these first meetings had gone well. Humans were curious, helpful, and quick to learn. They shared their technology freely and asked for little in return except friendship and trade agreements. But the Galactic Council was different. This ancient organization had ruled most of the galaxy for over 2,000 years. They had strict rules about who could join and what new members had to do to prove themselves worthy. For the past decade, they had been watching humanity with growing concern. Da-Un sat beside Kehoe, her military uniform neat and professional. As his security advisor, she had read every report about the Council's member species. The Velterans thought they were the smartest beings in the galaxy. The Corvins believed that military strength was the only thing that mattered. The Zalani were master traders who controlled most of the galaxy's economy. Dozens of other species had their own ideas about how the galaxy should work. What worried Da-Un most was how they all seemed to agree on one thing: humans were dangerous. The chamber fell silent as Chancellor Vestan rose from his elevated platform. The Velteran leader was tall and thin, with silver skin that seemed to glow under the chamber's lights. His large eyes swept across the room before settling on the human delegation. "We gather today to address the human question," Vestan said, his voice carrying easily through the chamber. "For 10 years, we have watched this species spread across our galaxy. They claim to come in peace, but their actions tell a different story." Kehoe felt his stomach tighten. This was not how he had hoped the session would begin. "Humans," Vestan continued, "have interfered in conflicts that did not concern them. They have shared advanced technology with primitive species. They have refused to follow established trade protocols. Most concerning of all, they have built artificial intelligence systems that rival our own ancient technologies." General Thakmor stood up from the Corvin section. The massive alien wore battle armor that gleamed like black metal. His 4 arms gestured dramatically as he spoke. "The humans are a warrior species," Thakmor declared. "They have never known true peace. Their history is filled with wars and conquest. Even now, their military grows stronger every year. They build weapons they claim are for defense, but we know better." Kehoe raised his hand, asking for permission to speak. Vestan nodded reluctantly. "Honored counselors," Kehoe began, standing slowly. "We come here today not as conquerors, but as friends. Yes, humanity has a violent past, but we have learned from our mistakes. We have had peace on Earth for over a century. Our colonies work together in harmony. When we encounter conflicts between other species, we offer help because we believe in justice and protection of the innocent. A Zilani representative named Quindar spoke up from her section. Her blue skin shimmered as she moved, and her voice had a musical quality that was both beautiful and cold. The humans speak of justice, but they destroy our economic systems, she said. They give away technology that should be sold. They teach primitive species to build things they should not understand. They have no respect for the natural order of galactic civilization. Dawn leaned forward slightly. She had studied the Zilani trade networks and knew exactly what Quindar meant. Humans had been sharing advanced medical technology with younger species, teaching them to cure diseases that had plagued them for centuries. They had shown agricultural techniques that increased crop yields by 300%. They had even given away the plans for basic fusion reactors, allowing developing worlds to power their cities without depending on expensive imports. The Zilani had been making huge profits selling these same technologies at prices that kept younger species trapped in debt for generations. Human generosity was costing them billions of credits every year. Kehoe tried again. We believe that knowledge should be shared for the good of all beings. When we help younger species develop their own capabilities, we create stronger partners and a more stable galaxy. Stability? Vexthon's voice rose with anger. You humans create chaos wherever you go. You ignore our laws, reject our authority, and act as if you know better than civilizations that have existed for millennia. The chamber erupted in agreement from most of the council members. Voices in dozens of languages filled the air as aliens expressed their frustration with human behavior. Kehoe waited for the noise to die down before speaking again. "What exactly do you want from us?" he asked quietly. Vexthon smiled, but there was no warmth in it. The Council has prepared a proposal for human integration into galactic society. You will accept protectorate status under Velteran oversight. Your military will be reduced to local defense forces only. Your artificial intelligence systems will be handed over to Council scientists for study and control. Your colonies will operate under Council law and pay taxes to support galactic infrastructure. Da-Yun felt her blood run cold. This was not integration. It was conquest without a war. Furthermore, Vexthon continued, all humans working in sensitive positions throughout Council space will undergo re-education to ensure they understand proper galactic protocols. Your species will be guided by wiser, more experienced civilizations until you prove capable of responsible behavior. The chamber fell silent again. Kehoe looked at his small delegation, then at the thousands of aliens staring down at them. He thought about the human colonies spread across dozens of worlds, the millions of people who had left Earth to build new lives among the stars. He thought about the children being born on human worlds, growing up with dreams of exploring even further into the unknown. And if we refuse? Kehoe asked. Then humanity will be declared a rogue civilization, Thakmor answered. All trade agreements will be canceled. All humans working in Council space will be expelled. Your species will be isolated until you come to your senses. Kehoe stood up slowly and gathered his papers. Da-Yun and the rest of the human delegation followed his lead. Honored counselors, Kehoe said, his voice calm and steady. We came here hoping to join a community of equals. We hope to contribute our knowledge and energy to building a better galaxy for all species. Instead, you offer us chains. He paused and looked directly at Vexthon. We have survived and thrived without your counsel for our entire history. We can continue to do so. Consider this our formal withdrawal from all integration negotiations. The humans walked out of the chamber in silence, Behind them, the council members began talking excitedly among themselves. Most seemed pleased that the troublesome humans had finally been put in their place. Vestan settled back into his chair with satisfaction. The human problem had been solved much more easily than he had expected. Within a few months, they would be begging to return under any conditions the council cared to offer. He had no idea how wrong he was. The communication came through on every human frequency at exactly the same time. Admiral Taemin stood in the command center of the human space station orbiting New Geneva, watching as his staff coordinated the largest movement of people in human history. "All civilian transports, this is Exodus Control," So Young's voice echoed through the station's speakers. "Please confirm your passenger manifests and cargo inventories. Remember, we're not just moving people, we're moving our entire civilization." Taemin had spent his entire career in the human space navy, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. When Kehoe's message arrived from the council chambers, every human leader had understood immediately what needed to be done. The galaxy's most powerful civilizations had given humanity a choice: submit or leave. The choice was easy. "Admiral," So Young called from her workstation, "we have confirmation from all major colonies. The evacuation is proceeding ahead of schedule." Taemin walked over to the massive display screen that showed the entire human sphere of influence. Red dots marked colonies that had already been evacuated. Yellow dots showed evacuations in progress. Green dots were colonies still preparing to leave. There were hundreds of them. "How are we doing on the research stations?" Taemin asked. "That's the tricky part," So Young replied, pulling up another screen. "Some of our scientists have been working alongside council species for years. They're having to pack up joint research projects without making it obvious what they're doing." On the mining world of Kepler 442b, Dr. Hyajin finished downloading the last of the geological survey data. She had spent 3 years working with a team of Velteran scientists, mapping the planet's mineral deposits and developing new extraction techniques. The Velterans thought she was just backing up her personal research files. They didn't know she was copying everything, including the revolutionary mining algorithms that had increased the planet's ore production by 400%. Without those algorithms, the Velterans would be back to using their old methods, which barely managed to extract half the available minerals. Hyjin looked around the laboratory one last time. She had genuinely enjoyed working with her alien colleagues. They were brilliant scientists, even if they could be arrogant about human capabilities. In 18 hours, she would be on a transport ship heading for the Outer Rim. The Velterans would wake up the next morning to find all the human staff gone, along with most of the equipment that made their research possible. Meanwhile, thousands of light years away, Bong-Su was having trouble sleeping. The Corvan intelligence analyst had been tracking human movements for months, and something about the current evacuation bothered him. It was too organized, too efficient. Most species took years to plan major population movements. The humans were doing it in weeks. "Computer, display human shipping patterns for the last 6 months," Bong-Su commanded. The holographic display showed him something that made his stomach turn cold. The humans hadn't started evacuating after the council meeting. They had been quietly moving people and equipment for months. Strategic personnel had been rotating out of sensitive positions. Critical supplies had been stockpiled on human worlds. Advanced equipment had been slowly disappearing from joint facilities. They knew, Bong-Su whispered to himself. They knew exactly what the council was going to demand. He started pulling up more data. Human doctors had been finishing their assignments and declining to renew contracts. Human engineers had been training alien replacements, claiming they wanted to focus on teaching responsibilities. Human traders had been closing long-term deals early, paying penalties to get out of contracts that wouldn't expire for years. The humans had been planning their departure long before Kehoe walked into the council chambers. Back at the evacuation center, Taemin received a priority message from Earth's government. The content was simple but chilling. Operation Clean Slate is approved. Remove all traces. So-Young looked up from her workstation. Admiral, I'm getting reports from our people throughout Council space. They're asking about classified protocols. Taemin nodded grimly. Send the authorization codes. Everything goes dark. Across the galaxy, humans began implementing procedures that had been prepared in secret for exactly this situation. In the Veltaran capital, a human technician named Jun Wu finished his last day maintaining the quantum processing systems that ran the planet's communication network. As he prepared to leave, he quietly activated a program that would slowly degrade the system's efficiency over the coming months. The Veltarans would notice the problems eventually, but by then it would be too late to stop the cascade of failures. Without human expertise to maintain the delicate quantum matrices, the entire network would eventually collapse. On the trading world of Nexus Prime, human logistics coordinator Min Ho was packing up his office when his Zalani supervisor stopped. Bye. I still don't understand why you're leaving, Quindar said. This evacuation seems so extreme. Surely your government will change their minds once they realize how much they need council markets. Minho smiled sadly as he sealed another box of personal items. The council made their position very clear. We're just giving you what you wanted. A galaxy without human interference. What Quindar didn't know was that Minho had spent the last 5 years designing the shipping routes that connected over 200 worlds in the Zalani trade network. His algorithms determined the most efficient paths for millions of cargo ships, reducing travel time and fuel costs by an average of 30%. In 3 days, when Minho's access codes expired, those algorithms would stop working. The Zalani would be forced to use their old routing systems, which were barely capable of handling 1/10 of the current shipping volume. As the evacuation continued, reports began reaching Admiral Taemin that worried him more than he wanted to admit. Human families were leaving behind homes they had built with their own hands. Scientists were abandoning research projects that had taken years to develop. Children were saying goodbye to alien friends they might never see again. So young, Taemin called. How are our people handling this emotionally? So Young paused in her work and looked at him with tired eyes. Better than expected, sir. Most of them are angry rather than sad. They feel like they were never really welcome here anyway. And our destination? The Outer Rim colonies are ready to receive everyone, plus the deep space construction projects are ahead of schedule. By the time this evacuation is complete, we'll have the infrastructure to support twice our current population. Taemin nodded, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were making a terrible mistake. Humanity had spent 50 years building relationships with alien species, learning from their knowledge, and contributing to galactic civilization. Now they were throwing it all away because of the arrogance of a few council leaders. But as he watched the evacuation proceed with clockwork precision, Taemin began to understand something that even he hadn't fully grasped before. Humanity wasn't running away in defeat. They were making a strategic withdrawal, taking their knowledge and capabilities with them. The galaxy was about to learn the difference between having humans as reluctant subjects and not having them at all. 3 weeks after the evacuation began, the last human transport ship left Council space. Behind them, they left empty buildings, silent laboratories, and thousands of alien colleagues who were just beginning to realize what they had lost. The real consequences, however, were still weeks away from becoming apparent. 3 months had passed since the last human transport ship disappeared beyond the galactic rim. Chancellor Vexathon sat in his private office, reviewing reports from across Council space. Most of them were routine, trade agreements, territorial, disputes, the usual business of governing a galactic civilization. Everything seemed to be running normally. Almost everything. Sir, his assistant entered with a concerned expression. We're receiving complaints about shipping delays in the outer sectors. Vexthon waved dismissively. Shipping delays are normal. What's the extent? 17% increase in average delivery times, sir. The Zalani Trade Authority is asking for an explanation. 17% didn't sound like much, but Vexthon knew that galactic commerce operated on razor-thin margins. Even small delays could cascade into major economic problems. Still, it was probably just a temporary adjustment period. On a monitoring station far beyond Council borders, Junwoo watched the quantum communication networks with growing satisfaction. The systems he had helped design were breaking down exactly as he had predicted. Without human technicians to perform the delicate calibrations, the quantum processors were slowly falling out of sync with each other. The Council engineers were competent, but they had never bothered to learn how the deeper layers of the system actually worked. They could fix obvious problems, but they couldn't see the subtle errors that were building up day by day. In another few months, the entire network would need to be rebuilt from scratch. Junwoo opened a secure channel to Earth's government. This is Observation Post 7. Phase 1 deterioration is proceeding as expected. Network efficiency is down 12% and falling. Meanwhile, on the agricultural world of Demeter, farmer Kang Su was facing a crisis he didn't understand. For the past 5 years, his crops had produced record harvests thanks to soil treatments developed by human agricultural scientists. The treatments used specially engineered bacteria that fixed nitrogen more efficiently than any natural process. But this season, something was wrong. The bacteria cultures were dying off, and crop yields were dropping rapidly. Kang Su had contacted the Council Agricultural Authority for help, but their scientists seemed confused by the human technology. We can provide you with standard fertilizers, the Veltaran agricultural advisor had told him, but they're much more expensive and less effective than what you're used to. Kang Su didn't know that the bacterial cultures required specific temperature and pH conditions to survive. The human scientists who had developed them had provided detailed maintenance protocols, but those protocols had been filed away and forgotten after the humans left. Without proper care, the bacteria were reverting to their original, less efficient forms. Similar problems were appearing on dozens of agricultural worlds throughout Council space. Food production was dropping just as the galactic population was, reaching record levels. On the medical station orbiting Vectara, Dr. Minho was finishing his last patient consultation. The Corvan military officer sitting across from him had been exposed to radiation during a training accident. 3 months ago, Minho would have simply prescribed one of the advanced radiation treatments that human medical researchers had developed. The treatment could repair cellular damage at the genetic level, completely reversing radiation poisoning. But Minho was the last human doctor in Council space, and he was leaving tomorrow. After he was gone, there would be no one left who understood how to synthesize the treatment compounds. "I can give you enough medication for the next 6 months," Minho told his patient. "But after that, you'll need to use traditional Corvan." "Treatments?" The officer looked confused. "What's the difference?" Minho hesitated before answering. The traditional treatments would keep the officer alive, but he would suffer from chronic pain and organ damage for the rest of his life. The human treatments could cure him completely, but the synthesis process required knowledge that the council medical authorities had dismissed as unnecessarily complex. "The traditional treatments are adequate," Minho said finally. As Minho prepared for departure, he thought about the dozens of diseases that human researchers had helped control or cure. The viral mutation that had been killing Zilani children until humans developed a targeted vaccine. The genetic disorder that plagued Velteran colonies until human gene therapy techniques provided a permanent fix. The bacterial infections that had been resistant to all known antibiotics until humans introduced adaptive treatment protocols. All of that knowledge was leaving with him. In the Corvan Military Command Center, General Thakmore was studying reports that made him increasingly uncomfortable. Solar activity in the Rigel sector had been increasing for weeks, but their early warning systems had failed to detect several major flare events. 3 outposts had lost their shields and suffered significant damage. "Get me the chief science." "Officer," Thakmore ordered. When the scientist arrived, Thakmore pointed to the stellar activity charts. "Why didn't we see these flares coming?" The Corvan scientist looked embarrassed. "Sir, our detection systems have been experiencing technical difficulties since the humans left. We're working to correct the problems, but the original calibration protocols seem to be incomplete." Thakmore felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean, incomplete?" The human technicians who maintained the system kept most of the calibration data in their personal files. When they left, they took that information with them. "We're having to reverse engineer our own equipment." The solar flare detection network had been a joint project between human and Corvan scientists. The humans had provided the theoretical framework and calibration methods, while the Corvans had built the physical sensors. It had seemed like an equal partnership at the time. Now Thakmore realized that the humans had been doing most of the actual scientific work while letting the Corvans think they were equal contributors. Without human expertise, the network was essentially useless. Back on Earth, President Insu was receiving similar reports from human observers throughout the galaxy. The carefully integrated systems that had taken decades to build were falling apart in a matter of months. "How long before they start asking for help?" asked his chief advisor. Insu looked at the intelligence report spread across his desk. Agricultural worlds facing food shortages, medical facilities struggling with diseases they couldn't treat, military outposts vulnerable to natural disasters they couldn't predict, trade networks slowing to a crawl as communication systems failed. "They're too proud to ask for help directly," Insu said. "They'll try to fix the problems themselves first. That will make everything worse." He was right. Across Council space, alien scientists and engineers were working frantically to reverse engineer human technology. But they were making critical mistakes because they didn't understand the underlying principles. Velteran technicians trying to repair quantum processors were introducing new errors faster than they could fix old ones. Zilani engineers attempting to optimize shipping routes were creating bottlenecks that brought entire sectors to a standstill. The most troubling reports were coming from the AI research facilities. Human artificial intelligence systems had been quietly integrated into thousands of council operations, helping to manage everything from traffic control to resource allocation. As these systems began to malfunction without proper maintenance, the effects rippled through every aspect of galactic civilization. On New Geneva, Admiral Taymin reviewed the latest intelligence summaries with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. The human evacuation had been more successful than anyone had dared hope. Nearly 2 million humans had been relocated to colonies beyond Council space without a single major incident. But watching the Council's civilization slowly collapse brought him no joy. These had been humanity's friends and partners, even if they had never been equals. "Sir," So Young approached with a communication pad. "We're intercepting increased Council military communications. It looks like they're starting to blame each other for the system failures." Taymin nodded grimly. That was exactly what human analysts had predicted. As the problems got worse, the Council member species would start pointing fingers at each other instead of acknowledging their dependence on human expertise. The real crisis was still months away, but the foundation of galactic civilization was already cracking, and every day that passed made it less likely that the damage could be repaired. The emergency alarm echoed through the Corvin military base on Sigma Draconis III at 0347 local time. Commander Zekhar rushed to the command center, still pulling on his uniform. The duty officer met him with the expression of barely controlled. "Panic! Sir, we've lost contact with Outposts 7, 12, and 15. Their shields went down approximately 6 minutes ago." Zekhar stared at the tactical display. All 3 outposts had been positioned to monitor the approaches to Corvin space, equipped with the most advanced defensive systems in the galaxy. "What caused the shield failures?" "Solar flare, sir. Class X9, directly from the system's primary star." "Where was the early warning?" Zekhar demanded. "Zekhar, we should have had at least 4 hours' notice." The duty officer's expression grew even more grim. "The detection network didn't register the flare until it was already halfway here, sir. By then, it was too late to power up the emergency shields." On Ni, a human observation station 16 light-years away, Sung Min watched the same solar event through instruments that had detected it 3 days earlier. The human early warning system had tracked the magnetic buildup in the star's corona, calculated the precise timing and intensity of the flare, and predicted its path through space with 97% accuracy. But the humans were no longer sharing that information with the Council. Sung Min opened a secure channel to the Human Defense Command. "This is Monitor Station Alpha. Confirming Class X9 solar event in the Sigma Draconis system. 3 Corvin installations appear to have suffered total shield failure." He paused, watching the energy readings spike as the solar storm continued. "To batter the defenseless outposts. Estimated casualties, 400 to 600 military personnel. Estimated repair time for Corvin facilities, 18 to 24 months. Back on Sigma Draconis III, rescue ships were already launching toward the damaged outposts. But Zekhar knew that without shields, the bases had been exposed to radiation levels that would kill most organic life forms within minutes. They weren't launching a rescue mission. They were launching a recovery mission. "Get me General Thakmor," Zekhar ordered. "He needs to know that our entire early warning network is compromised." Meanwhile, halfway across the galaxy, the agricultural crisis was reaching a breaking point. Yunji sat in her office on the human colony world of Kepler 438b, reading reports from farming planets throughout Council space. As the former head of agricultural development for the Zalani Trade Authority, she understood exactly what was happening to their food production systems. The engineered soil bacteria that had revolutionized Council agriculture were dying off, planet by planet. Without the specific maintenance protocols that human scientists had developed, The bacterial colonies were reverting to their natural state. Some were becoming completely inactive, others were producing toxic compounds that poisoned the soil they were supposed to improve. "Ma'am," her assistant entered the office. "We're receiving communication requests from 17 different agricultural worlds. They're asking for emergency consultation services." Yunji looked at the list of planets. Many of them were facing food shortages that could lead to famine within months. The Zalani leadership had been so confident that their own scientists could maintain human-developed technology that they had refused to pay for ongoing human support contracts. "Send them our standard response," Yunji said sadly. "Human agricultural services is no longer operating within Council space due to regulatory restrictions imposed by the Galactic Council." It was a polite way of saying that the Council had made their choice, and now they would have to live with the consequences. The communication crisis was becoming even more severe. Du Hyun, monitoring quantum networks from a human facility in the Centauri sector, watched as cascade failures spread through the galactic communication grid. The quantum entanglement matrices that enabled faster-than-light communication required constant fine-tuning to maintain their synchronization. Human technicians had developed a complex system of automatic adjustments that kept the networks stable. But that system depended on AI algorithms that the Council scientists had never fully understood. As the algorithms began to fail without proper maintenance, the quantum matrices started falling out of sync. "We're seeing a 47% degradation in communication efficiency across all Council networks," Do-hyun reported to his superiors. "Long-distance communications are experiencing delays of up to 18 hours. Some sectors are losing contact with the central command networks entirely." The economic implications were staggering. The Zalani trade empire depended on instant communication to coordinate shipping across hundreds of star systems. Without reliable communications, their carefully orchestrated trade networks were collapsing into chaos. On the Zalani trade world of Nexus Prime, Director Quindar stared at her holographic displays in growing desperation. Ships were arriving days behind schedule because shipping computers couldn't receive updated routing information. Cargo manifests were getting lost in transmission, leading to massive inventory errors. Trade agreements were falling apart because negotiating parties couldn't maintain reliable contact. "Get me the human trade liaison," Quindar ordered her assistant. "Ma'am," the assistant replied nervously, "there are no human trade liaisons anymore. They all left 3 months ago." Quindar felt a chill of realization. In all her years of managing galactic trade, she had never paid much attention to how the systems actually worked. She had focused on profits and negotiations while leaving the technical details to subordinates. Many of those subordinates had been humans. "Then get me whoever is in charge of our routing computers." 20 minutes later, a young Zalani engineer named Tekvar stood nervously in Quindar's office. He had been promoted to head of computer operations after the humans left, despite having only basic training in the systems. "I need you to explain why our shipping networks are failing," Quindar said bluntly. Tekvar shifted uncomfortably. "Ma'am, the routing algorithms were designed by human mathematicians. We have the basic code, but we don't understand how to modify it for changing conditions. When new trade routes open or shipping volumes change, we can't update the algorithms properly. Then use the old routing systems." "We tried that, ma'am. The old systems can only handle about 15% of our current shipping volume. If we tried to route all our traffic through them, the entire network would collapse within days." Quindar stared at him in horror. The Zilani had built their entire economy on the foundation of human-designed systems that they couldn't operate without human expertise. Similar realizations were occurring throughout Council space. The Velteran research institutes were discovering that their most advanced experiments depended on human AI systems that were no longer being maintained. The Corvan military was finding that their tactical computers couldn't function without human-designed analysis programs. Even basic infrastructure like power grids and water treatment plants were beginning to fail as human-installed systems broke down. On Earth, President In-Su met with his cabinet to discuss the latest intelligence reports. The collapse of Council Wader. Civilization was happening faster than anyone had predicted. "How long before they start asking for help?" asked Defense Minister Tae-ho. "They won't ask," In-Su replied. "Their pride won't let them admit that they need us. They'll keep trying to fix the problems themselves until their entire civilization is on the verge of collapse." Foreign Minister Na Yun looked up from her reports. "Sir, we're receiving informal communications from some of the smaller council members. The Aquilani Confederation is hinting that they might be interested in separate negotiations." In-Su nodded thoughtfully. The smaller species had always been treated as junior partners by the major council powers. They were probably realizing that humanity had been more valuable as allies than the council leadership had ever acknowledged. "Continue monitoring the situation," In-Su ordered. "But no direct responses yet. When the council is ready to talk seriously about partnership instead of domination, they'll know how to find us." As the meeting ended, In-Su looked out at the stars through his office window. Somewhere out there, the greatest civilization in galactic history was slowly tearing itself apart because its leaders had been too arrogant to recognize the value of cooperation. The humans hadn't wanted this outcome, but they hadn't caused it either. The Council had created this crisis through their own prejudice and pride. Now everyone would have to live with the consequences. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in the organization's 2,000-year history. Representatives from across known space filled the Great Chamber, but instead of the usual ceremonial dignity, the air crackled with tension and barely controlled panic. Chancellor Vexathon stood at his podium, his silver skin pale under the chamber's lights. Behind him, holographic displays showed the cascading failures that were spreading across Council space like a plague. "The situation is temporary," Vexathon announced, his voice carrying less authority than usual. "Our best scientists are working around the clock to resolve these technical difficulties. We estimate that normal operations will resume within 6 months." In the Corvan section, General Takmor stood up abruptly, his 4 arms gesturing angrily. 6 months? Chancellor, we've lost 17 military outposts to system failures. Our early warning networks are completely unreliable. The Outer Rim colonies are practically defenseless. "The military problems are being addressed," Vexthon replied, but his tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. "We're implementing backup systems and training new technicians." From the Zilani trade delegation, Quindar's voice cut through the chamber like ice. "Training new technicians with what knowledge? Our shipping networks are operating at 30% efficiency. We're losing millions of credits every day. Some sectors haven't received supply shipments in weeks." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The smaller species were beginning to voice complaints that had been building for months: food shortages on agricultural worlds, medical emergencies that couldn't be treated with available technology, communication blackouts that left entire systems isolated. Perhaps suggested a representative from the Aquilani Confederation. "We should consider reaching out to the humans for technical assistance." The chamber fell silent. Vexthan's expression hardened. "The humans made their choice when they rejected our generous offer of partnership," he said coldly. "We will not beg for help from a species that turned their backs on galactic civilization." But privately, some council members were already considering exactly that. On the remote research station orbiting Tau Ceti, Wu Jin received an encrypted message that made him smile sadly. It was from Quindar, sent through channels that couldn't be traced back to the council leadership. The message was brief and carefully worded. "Former trade associate seeks consultation regarding technical difficulties with shipping management systems. Willing to discuss compensation for advisory services." Wu Jin had spent 15 years working with Zalani traders before the council crisis. He understood what Quindar was really asking. The Zalani trade networks were collapsing, and she needed human expertise to save them. He forwarded the message to Earth's foreign ministry with his own recommendation. "Unofficial request for assistance from Zalani Trade Authority. Suggest we maintain our position of non-interference until the council leadership officially requests negotiations." Similar messages were arriving through dozens of unofficial channels. Individual council members, planetary governments, and private organizations were all quietly reaching out to human contacts. But Earth's response was consistent. No assistance would be provided while the official council position remained hostile to humanity. On the military research station orbiting Vega, Ji Young was coordinating humanity's response to the crisis from her position as Minister of External Affairs. The reports coming in from council space painted a picture of civilization in slow-motion collapse. "Ma'am," her assistant handed her the latest intelligence summary, "the Corvin military has lost 60% of their early warning capability. The Veltaran research institutes are shutting down experiments because their AI systems are failing. Agricultural production is down 40% across 17 major farming worlds." Ji Young nodded grimly. The human leadership had known this would happen, but seeing it unfold was still disturbing. These weren't just statistics. They represented millions of beings whose lives were being disrupted by their leaders' arrogance. "Any change in the official council position?" "No, ma'am. Chancellor Vexthan is still claiming that the problems are temporary and that the council doesn't need human assistance." Meanwhile, in the depths of space beyond the galactic rim, something extraordinary was taking shape. Yan Su stood on the observation deck of Construction Platform 7, watching as massive automated systems assembled structures that dwarfed anything ever built in council space. The humans hadn't been idle during their evacuation. For years, they had been developing technologies in secret, building capabilities that went far beyond what they had shared with the council. The artificial intelligence systems that were now failing throughout council space were primitive compared to the AIs that helped design these new human constructions. "How long until the primary facilities are operational?" Yan Su asked his engineering team. 18 months for the main habitat rings," replied his chief assistant. "The industrial complexes should be fully functional within 12 months. And the defense systems? Those are already online, sir. If the council decides to send military forces to force us back, they'll find that we're not as defenseless as they assume." Hyun-Soo nodded with satisfaction. The council had made a critical error in assuming that human technological development had stagnated while they worked within council space. In reality, human scientists had been developing advanced technologies in parallel, sharing only the basic applications while keeping the revolutionary breakthroughs to themselves. Back in Cheongjia, Council space, the crisis was deepening daily. On the agricultural world of Demeter, farmer Kang Su watched his crops dying despite every effort to save them. The soil bacteria that had made his world one of the most productive in the galaxy were not just dying, they were actively poisoning the land. "Doctor," Kang Su pleaded with the Velteron agricultural scientist who had come to assess the situation, "isn't there anything you can do?" Dr. Melthara looked uncomfortable as she examined the soil samples. The bacterial cultures appear to have mutated into a toxic strain. We're seeing similar problems on dozens of worlds. Our best recommendation is to sterilize the soil and start over with natural bacteria. How long would that take? Full soil recovery? Probably 15 to 20 years? Kang Su felt his world collapse around him. 20 years without the enhanced bacteria meant 20 years of subsistence farming. His planet, which had been supporting the food needs of 4-star systems, would barely be able to feed its own population. Similar conversations were happening across the galaxy. The advanced medical treatments that had been saving thousands of lives every day were no longer available. Diseases that had been eradicated were returning as the preventive systems failed. Genetic therapies that had been curing hereditary disorders were being replaced by traditional treatments that merely managed symptoms. Dr. Chang Ho, one of the last human cultural liaisons to leave council space, had returned to Earth with reports that broke his heart. The universities where he had been teaching human history and philosophy were closing their xenocultural programs. The exchange students who had been learning about Earth's literature and music were being recalled to focus on practical subjects. "They're erasing 50 years of cultural exchange," Chang Ho reported to the Human Cultural Council. "Not because they want to, but because they can't afford to maintain programs that don't directly address their technical crisis." President In Su listened to these reports with growing sadness. The human leadership had hoped that the council would quickly realize their mistake and open negotiations for a more equitable partnership. Instead, the council seemed determined to solve their problems through pride and denial. "Sir," Foreign Minister Naun entered his office with an urgent communication. "We're receiving our first official request for assistance." Insu looked at the message with surprise. It wasn't from the council leadership, but from the Aquilani Confederation, one of the smaller species that had always been marginalized by the major powers. "They're offering to withdraw from the Galactic Council in exchange for a bilateral alliance with humanity," Na-Yun explained. "They're facing complete agricultural collapse and need our biotechnology expertise urgently." In-Su considered the implications. If the smaller council members started defecting, it would put enormous pressure on the major powers to reconsider their position. But it would also mean the permanent fragmentation of galactic civilization. "What's our assessment of their situation? Critical. They have maybe 6 months before widespread famine begins. Their entire agricultural system was based on human-developed bacterial cultures." In-Su made his decision. "Send a humanitarian aid package, but make it clear that we're providing assistance to the Aquilani people, not to former council members. We're not trying to break up the council. We're just helping beings in need." It was a subtle distinction, but an important one. Humanity wasn't trying to destroy the council through divide-and-conquer tactics. They were simply demonstrating what real partnership looked like. As news of the humanitarian aid reached other struggling worlds, more unofficial requests began arriving. But the council leadership remained stubbornly silent, too proud to admit that they needed the help of the species they had tried to subjugate. 6 months after the human departure, the University of Vec Prime was a shadow of its former self. Dr. Chang Ho walked through the empty corridors one last time, his footsteps echoing in halls that had once buzzed with intellectual activity. As the final human academic to leave council space, he carried with him the last remnants of 50 years of scholarly collaboration. The Xenocultural Studies program had been the first to close. Then the advanced mathematics departments that had relied on human-developed analytical AI systems. The physics laboratories followed when their quantum simulation programs began producing increasingly unreliable results. Now, entire wings of the university stood empty. Professor Chang Ho, a young Velteran student named Kethia, approached him nervously. "Is it true that you're leaving today?" Chang Ho nodded sadly. "I'm afraid so. There's not much left for me to do here." Kethia looked around at the deserted corridors. "I don't understand what's happening. 6 months ago, this was one of the greatest centers of learning in the galaxy. Now half the programs are shut down, and the remaining professors say they can't access the research databases." Chang Ho paused, looking at the young scientist who reminded him of his own graduate students from years past. "What's your field of study?" "Applied quantum mechanics. I was working on a project to improve faster-than-light communication efficiency. But the AI systems that help with the complex calculations have been malfunctioning for months." "Have you tried consulting the original research papers?" Kethia looked confused. "What do you mean?" Chang Ho realized with growing horror that the young Velteran didn't understand how dependent their entire academic system had become on human innovations. "The theoretical framework for quantum communication enhancement. Who developed it?" I assumed it was ancient Velteran science. The AI systems have always been able to solve these problems automatically." Chang Ho pulled out his personal datapad and showed Kethia a series of research papers. "These are the foundational studies for quantum communication theory. The authors are Dr. Sarah Chen, Dr. James Martinez, Dr. Yuki Tanaka, all human scientists. The AI systems you've been using were trained on human research and maintained by human technicians." The color drained from Kethia's silver skin. But that means without human expertise, your university can't function at its previous level," Chang Ho finished gently. "I'm sorry, but I tried to warn the academic administrators months ago." As Chang Ho prepared to board his transport ship, he reflected on the broader implications of what he had witnessed. The Galactic Council hadn't just lost human technical support. They had lost their capacity for innovation and discovery. For decades, human creativity and problem-solving ability had been driving galactic scientific progress forward. Without it, Council civilization was stagnating. Meanwhile, on the monitoring station designated Subin Alpha, communications specialist Subin was tracking an alarming increase in military transmissions throughout Council space. The messages were encrypted, but their volume and urgency patterns told a clear story. "This is Subin Alpha reporting to Human Intelligence Command," she broadcast on a secure channel. "Council military communications have increased by 400% over the past week. Transmission patterns suggest emergency military council sessions and possible mobilization orders." The implications were troubling. As the Council's civilian infrastructure continued to collapse, the military leaders were becoming increasingly influential. Subin had been tracking General Thakmore's communications in particular, and the Corvin military leader seemed to be pushing for aggressive action against humanity. On Earth, President Insu received Subin's report with growing concern. The human leadership had hoped that the Council would eventually acknowledge their mistake and request negotiations. Instead, the military faction seemed to be gaining control. "Teho," Insu called to his defense minister. "What's the status of our defense preparations?" "All Outer Rim installations are fully operational," Teho replied. "Our deep space monitoring networks have detected increased Council military activity, but no direct threats to human territory yet." "And our new capabilities?" Teho smiled grimly. "Ready for deployment if necessary. The Council has no idea what humanity has been developing while they focused on their political games. The truth was that human military technology had advanced far beyond what they had ever shared with the Council. The defensive systems that protected human space weren't just superior to Council technology, they represented breakthroughs that the Council couldn't have imagined. Back in Council space, Chancellor Vestan was facing the greatest political crisis of his career. The emergency council session had been called by a coalition of member species who were demanding immediate action to address the cascading failures. "The situation is unsustainable," declared Ambassador Teclon from the Rigelian Consortium. "Our industrial production has dropped 60%. Our communication networks are failing daily. Our agricultural worlds are facing famine. The Council must take action." "What action do you suggest?" Vexathon asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Reopen negotiations with humanity," Teclon stated bluntly. "We need their expertise to repair our infrastructure." The chamber erupted in arguments. The military faction, led by General Takmor, opposed any contact with humanity. "We don't negotiate with rebels," Takmor declared. "If necessary, we'll use military force to bring them back under Council authority." But a young Velteran scientist named Kethia had managed to gain access to the chamber, and she stood up with information that silenced the arguing delegates. "Honored councilors," she said, her voice trembling but determined. "I've been researching the extent of human contributions to our civilization. The results are comprehensive." She activated a holographic display that filled the center of the chamber. Every major technological breakthrough in the past 50 years had significant human involvement. Our quantum communication networks, designed by human mathematicians, our medical breakthroughs, developed in collaboration with human biologists, our agricultural enhancements, created by human genetic engineers. The display showed connection after connection between human research and Council technological advancement. But more importantly, Kethia continued, the humans weren't just contributing to our research, they were driving it. Our own scientists were often implementing human ideas without realizing the source. Vexthon stared at the data in growing horror. "Are you saying that our entire technological civilization depends on human knowledge?" "Not depends, honored Chancellor. Depended. Past tense, because the humans are gone, and they took their knowledge with them." The chamber fell into stunned silence as the full implications became clear. The Galactic Council hadn't just lost a junior partner, they had lost the intellectual foundation of their entire civilization. Furthermore, Kethia added, "My research suggests that human technological development didn't stop when they joined the Council. Evidence indicates they were developing advanced technologies in parallel, sharing only basic applications while keeping revolutionary innovations to themselves." General Thakmor stood up angrily. "Are you suggesting that the humans were deliberately sabotaging our development?" "No, sir. I'm suggesting they were being cautious. And given the Council's current attitude toward humanity, their caution appears to have been justified." In the weeks that followed, similar revelations emerged from across Council space. Research institutions discovered that their most important projects had been dependent on human expertise. Military commanders found that their most effective tactical systems had been designed with human input. Economic analysts realized that the trade networks that sustained galactic commerce had been optimized using human algorithms. The scope of the crisis was beyond anything the Council leadership had imagined. They weren't dealing with temporary technical difficulties. They were witnessing the collapse of a civilization that had unknowingly built itself on a foundation of human innovation. On the Human Observation Post monitoring Council communications, Sang-Woo intercepted a transmission that made him pause. It was Chancellor Vestan, speaking to his private advisors in what he thought was a secure channel. How long do our analysts estimate before complete systemic collapse? Vestan was asking. If current trends continue, 18 months for total infrastructure failure, came the reply. Agricultural collapse could begin within 6 months. The Outer Rim colonies are already requesting emergency evacuation assistance. And the military option? General Thakmore's forces are not capable of forcing human compliance. Our intelligence suggests that human defensive capabilities are far beyond what we previously estimated. Sang-Woo transmitted the intercept to Earth with a priority flag. The Council was finally beginning to understand the true scope of their mistake, but their pride was still preventing them from taking the obvious solution. President In-Soo read the intelligence report with mixed emotions. Part of him felt vindicated. The Council was finally acknowledging human value. But mostly, he felt sad that it had taken the near collapse of galactic civilization for them to reach this realization. The question now was whether the Council would swallow their pride and ask for help, or whether they would continue their denial until the Council's deep space reconnaissance ship, Vigilant Observer, had been tracking human movements beyond the galactic rim for 3 weeks. When Commander Yextar made the discovery that would change everything. What the crew found at the edge of human space defied every assumption the Council had made about human capabilities. "Commander," the sensor operator called out, her voice tight with disbelief, "you need to see this." Yextar moved to the primary display screen and felt his blood turn cold. Where the Council had expected to find scattered refugee colonies and makeshift defensive positions, they instead observed a massive industrial complex that dwarfed anything in Council space. Structures that must have taken decades to build stretched across multiple star systems. Orbital shipyards that could construct vessels larger than Council dreadnoughts. Energy collectors that harnessed the power of entire stars. Most disturbing of all, defensive installations that radiated energy signatures unlike anything in known Council technology. "How long have they been building this?" Yextar whispered. His science officer, Dr. Pelnova, was studying the sensor readings with growing amazement. "Based on the construction patterns and energy signatures, I'd estimate at least 20 years of continuous development." 20 years? But humans have only had faster-than-light travel for 50 years? Yes, sir. Which means they've been building these installations for nearly half of their spacefaring history. While they were working within Council space, they were simultaneously developing this empire. Admiral Sang-Woo stood on the command bridge of the human battleship New Horizon, watching the Council reconnaissance vessel through sensors that were far more advanced than anything the aliens possessed. The ship had been detected the moment it entered human monitoring range 3 light-years away. "Should we make contact with them?" asked his communications officer. "Not yet," Sang-Woo replied. "Let them observe for a while. It's important that they understand what they're really dealing with." The New Horizon itself was a demonstration of how far human technology had advanced in secret. Nearly 2 kilometers long, and equipped with defensive systems that could withstand the combined firepower of an entire Council fleet, it represented just one of hundreds of similar vessels in the human deep space navy. But the ship's most remarkable feature wasn't its size or weapons, it was its crew. Only 30 humans were needed to operate the entire vessel, with the rest of the work handled by artificial intelligence systems that made Council computers look like pocket calculators. "Sir," the tactical officer reported, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth. The Council is mobilizing their military forces." Sang Wu nodded grimly. Intelligence reports had indicated that General Thakmor was pushing for military action against humanity. The Corvin leader apparently believed that human defensive capabilities were minimal and that a show of force would bring the humans back under Council control. He was about to discover how wrong he was. On Earth, Chief Science Officer Ye Jin was briefing President In Su on the true extent of human technological advancement. The meeting was taking place in a secure facility that itself demonstrated capabilities the Council had never suspected. The faster-than-light communication breakthrough was achieved 18 months ago, Yejin reported. We can now transmit information instantaneously across galactic distances without depending on quantum entanglement networks. In Su studied the technical specifications with amazement. Why wasn't this shared with the Council? The decision was made at the highest levels to limit technology sharing after we detected concerning patterns in Council behavior, Yejin explained. Our analysis suggested that the Council leadership viewed humanity as a temporary resource to be exploited rather than a permanent partner to be valued. She activated another holographic display. The matter compilation technology reached operational status 6 months ago. We can now convert energy directly into complex materials at the molecular level. The implications for manufacturing and construction are revolutionary. And the time dilation experiments? Still in early testing phases, but promising. We've achieved stable temporal fields that can accelerate time within confined spaces. The applications for research and development are extraordinary. In Su shook his head in wonder. While the Council had been treating humanity as a junior partner barely worthy of respect, human scientists had been developing technologies that could transform galactic civilization. Defense Minister Taeho entered the briefing room with urgent news. Mr. President, our monitoring stations report that the Council military is massing forces at the edge of our territory. General Thakmor appears to be preparing for some kind of military action. How large a force? Approximately 400 ships, including their most advanced dreadnoughts. It's the largest military formation the Council has assembled in over a century. Yejin looked concerned. Sir, if they attempt to use force against our installations, should we reveal our defensive capabilities? In Su considered the question carefully. Humanity had spent years developing defensive systems that could protect their territory from any conceivable threat. But using those systems would reveal just how far human technology had advanced, potentially escalating the conflict beyond any possibility of peaceful resolution. Prepare all defensive systems, but don't activate them unless directly attacked, he decided. Let's see if we can resolve this without demonstrating just how outmatched they are. Back on the Council reconnaissance ship, Commander Yexatar was receiving reports that made him increasingly nervous about the military buildup behind him. Sir, his communications officer announced, we're being contacted by the human installation. A holographic display activated, showing a human officer in a uniform that Yextar didn't recognize. The man spoke with calm authority that suggested he was accustomed to command. This is Admiral Sang Woo of the Human Deep Space Fleet. Commander, Yextar, you and your crew are welcome to observe our installations, but please maintain your current distance for safety reasons. Yextar was startled that the human knew his name and rank. Admiral, I wasn't aware that humans had achieved flag rank in their military structure. Sang-Woo smiled politely. There are many things about humanity that the Council never bothered to learn, Commander. For example, did you know that we've been monitoring your military buildup for the past 3 weeks? Monitoring our... Yextar felt his stomach drop. How? We have sensor networks that extend far beyond what you might expect. We're aware that General Thakmor is approaching with a force of 412 ships, including 16 dreadnoughts and 47 heavy cruisers. Dr. Pelnova whispered urgently to Yextar. Sir, those numbers are exactly correct. How could they possibly know our fleet composition? Sang-Woo continued, as if he had heard the whispered conversation. Commander, I'm going to share some information with you that I hope you'll pass along to General Thakmor. Humanity has no interest in military conflict with the Council, but we are fully prepared to defend ourselves if necessary. The holographic display shifted to show technical specifications that made Yextar's crew gasp in amazement. Human defensive installations that could project energy shields across entire star systems. Weapons platforms that could disable ships without destroying them. Most impressive of all, a fleet of vessels that appeared to be built using technologies that the Council had never encountered. These specifications, Dr. Pelnova breathed. They're beyond anything in our databases. Their energy output readings alone suggest power generation capabilities that shouldn't be possible. Sang-Woo's expression remained friendly but serious. Commander, humanity spent decades as junior partners in galactic civilization. Always careful not to appear threatening to our more established neighbors. But we never stopped developing our own capabilities. What you're seeing now is the result of 50 years of human innovation, unrestrained by the limitations that the Council tried to place on our development. Yextar found his voice. Admiral, are you saying that humanity has been deliberately concealing your technological capabilities? Not concealing, Commander. Simply being cautious. We shared what we thought was appropriate for peaceful cooperation while keeping our more advanced developments private. Given the Council's current attitude toward humanity, I think our caution was justified. The transmission ended, leaving Yextar and his crew staring at specifications that redefined their understanding of what was possible. The humans hadn't been hiding their weakness during the peace negotiations. They had been hiding their strength. Get me a priority channel to General Thakmor, Yextar ordered. He needs to know what he's really facing. But even as the warning was transmitted back to the Council fleet, Yextar suspected it was too late to prevent the confrontation that was coming. The Council military had been planning their assault based on the assumption that humanity was a weak, divided species with minimal defensive capabilities. They were about to discover that humanity was neither weak nor unprepared. The only question now was whether the demonstration of human power would convince the Council to finally seek peaceful resolution, or whether it would escalate their desperation into something even more dangerous. 1 year after the failed peace talks, Chancellor Vestan stood alone in his private transport ship at the edge of human space. The proud Velteran leader who had once commanded the respect of 1,000 worlds now traveled without escorts, carrying only a simple diplomatic message that had taken him months to compose. Behind him, the Galactic Council was in ruins, not from war or conquest, but from the simple absence of the humans they had tried to subjugate. Agricultural worlds faced widespread famine. Communication networks functioned sporadically. Medical facilities struggled with diseases they could no longer treat effectively. The civilization that had ruled the galaxy for 2 millennia was slowly dying of its own arrogance. Incoming transmission from human space control, his ship's computer announced. A holographic figure appeared, a human woman in a crisp diplomatic uniform. Chancellor Vestan, I am Ambassador Na Yun of the Human Commonwealth. You are cleared to proceed to Kepler Station for your meeting with President Dae-sung. Vestan nodded stiffly. Even this simple courtesy hurt his pride. A year ago, human ambassadors had traveled to him, seeking audience in the Great Council chambers. Now he was the supplicant, requesting permission to enter human territory. Thank you, Ambassador, he replied. I appreciate your government's willingness to meet with me. As his ship moved deeper into human space, Vestan was amazed by what he observed. The scattered refugee colonies he had expected to find had transformed into thriving communities that made even the greatest council worlds seem primitive by comparison. Orbital cities that housed millions of beings in perfect harmony with their environments. Industrial complexes that produced goods with zero waste and unlimited clean energy. Most remarkably, he saw ships and installations built by species he recognized, former council members who had apparently chosen to join this new human civilization. Kepler Station was unlike anything Vestan had ever seen. The massive structure combined architectural elements from dozens of different species, creating a unique aesthetic that somehow felt both alien and familiar. Gardens filled with plants from hundreds of worlds created natural spaces throughout the station. Children of multiple species played together in common areas while their parents worked on projects that the Chancellor couldn't begin to understand. President Dae-sung met him in a simple conference room with large windows that looked out at the bustling station. The human leader was younger than Vestan had expected, with an expression that combined intelligence with genuine sadness. Chancellor, Dae-sung said, rising to greet his guest, "Thank you for coming. Please sit." Vestan took the offered chair, noticing that it had been adjusted for his physiology, a small courtesy that the council had rarely extended to visiting dignitaries. "I suppose you know why I'm here," Vestan said quietly. "I have a general idea," Dae-sung replied, "but I'd like to hear it from you directly." Vestan struggled with words that went against everything he had believed about his place in the galaxy. "The council, we made a mistake. We assumed that humanity was dependent on us for guidance and protection. We thought we were the advanced civilization offering partnership to a primitive species." He paused, looking out at the incredible technology visible through the windows. "We were wrong. About everything." Dae-sung leaned forward with genuine interest. "What changed your mind?" "The collapse happened faster than anyone predicted," Vestan explained. "Within months, our agricultural systems failed. Our communication networks became unreliable. Our medical capabilities regressed by decades. We kept telling ourselves it was temporary, that our scientists could solve the problems." He laughed bitterly. "It took a young researcher named Kethia to show us the truth. Every major advancement in the past 50 years had human contributions that we had simply forgotten. We took credit for innovations that weren't ours and assumed that expertise would remain available forever." "And the military option?" Vestan's expression grew pained. "General Thakmor convinced himself that human defensive capabilities were minimal. He assembled the largest fleet in Council history to force your return to our territory." "I'm aware of that fleet," Dae-sung said calmly. "What happened to it?" "Your Admiral Sang-woo disabled every ship without firing a single destructive shot," Vestan admitted. Weapons that simply shut down our power systems. Defensive shields that made our most powerful weapons completely ineffective. Technologies that our scientists still can't understand. He looked directly at Dae-sung. How long have you been capable of destroying the entire Council fleet? Since before we first requested admission to the Council, Dae-sung replied honestly. Our defensive capabilities have always been sufficient to protect human space from any threat. We simply chose not to advertise that fact. Vestan felt the full weight of the Council's mistake. You never needed our protection. You never needed our guidance. You were humoring us. Not humoring, Dae-sung corrected gently. We genuinely wanted to be part of a larger galactic community. We believed that cooperation between species could create something greater than any of us could achieve alone. We were willing to accept a junior role because we thought it would lead to true partnership eventually. Instead, we treated you like subjects to be controlled. Some did. Others, like Dr. Melthara from your agricultural department and engineer, Tekvar from the Zalani trade networks, understood what we were trying to build. Unfortunately, they weren't the ones making policy decisions. Vestan nodded sadly. Many of the Council's best scientists and engineers had warned the leadership about the risks of losing human cooperation. They had been ignored or dismissed as being too influenced by human propaganda. What do you want from me? Vestan asked finally. Dae-sung activated a holographic display that showed the current state of both human and Council space. The human Commonwealth now includes 47 species that have chosen to join us as equal partners. We've shared our advanced technologies freely, and together we've achieved breakthroughs that none of us could have managed alone. He gestured to another section of the display. Council space, meanwhile, is fragmenting. The smaller species are requesting admission to the Commonwealth because they can't survive the technological regression. The major powers are struggling to maintain basic infrastructure. Are you offering to save us? I'm offering to include you, Dae-sung corrected. The Commonwealth isn't about human dominance. It's about species working together as equals. Every member contributes their unique capabilities and knowledge. Every member benefits from the collective expertise. He leaned back in his chair. But joining requires acknowledging that no single species is superior to others. It requires accepting that cooperation is more powerful than domination. Vestan considered the offer. What would happen to the Council structure, to our traditional hierarchies? They would be dissolved, Dae-sung said bluntly. The Commonwealth operates on principles of democratic cooperation and shared governance. Every species has a voice proportional to their population and contribution, but no species rules over others. And if we refuse, then you continue as you are, Dae-sung replied. The Commonwealth won't interfere with Council internal affairs. We'll provide humanitarian aid to prevent suffering, but we won't force political changes. Vestan understood the unspoken implication. Without fundamental changes, the Council would continue to deteriorate until it ceased to exist as a meaningful organization. I need to discuss this with the remaining Council members, he said finally. Of course. Take all the time you need. As Vestan prepared to leave, he turned back to Dae-sung with one final question. Why didn't you tell us the truth? About your capabilities from the beginning? Dae-sung smiled sadly. Would you have believed us? Would the Council have accepted humans as equal partners if you had known we were technologically superior? Vestan thought about the arrogance and prejudice that had characterized Council attitudes toward humanity. No. We would have seen you as a threat to be contained or destroyed. Exactly. So we chose to demonstrate our value through contribution rather than intimidation. We hoped that eventually the Council would recognize that cooperation was more beneficial than domination. 6 months later, the signing ceremony took place on New Geneva, humanity's capital world beyond the galactic rim. Representatives from over 300 species gathered to witness the formal dissolution of the Galactic Council and the establishment of the Galactic Commonwealth. Chancellor Vexithan, now holding the title of Velteran Commonwealth Representative, stood beside President Insu as they signed the founding charter. The document established principles of equality, cooperation, and shared prosperity that would govern relationships between species for generations to come. Young engineer Meek Young watched the ceremony from the observation deck of the Commonwealth Science Institute, where she worked alongside colleagues from dozens of species on projects that dwarfed anything the old council had attempted. Terraforming technologies that could transform dead worlds into garden paradises. Medical research that promised to extend healthy lifespan for all species. Energy systems that could power entire civilizations without environmental impact. Hard to believe it's only been 18 months since the evacuation, her Zalani colleague Quindar commented, Mikyun.